we went to them with our vision, which was community focused, neighborhood driven, family friendly, watering hole. That's what we wanted to build.
All right, this is the Yield Coach Show, Season 1, Episode 10. In every episode, we bring you dynamic entrepreneurs, real estate investors, business leaders, inspirational guests ready to open up, share their story, the good, the bad, the ugly, so you can learn lessons, gain advantages, and accelerate your success. I am your host, Ian Brown. I am joined today by our guest, Broc Flores. Broc is 6-year active Navy, still a reservist. He's a practicing dentist. He's also the co-owner of Fishweir Brewery in Jacksonville, Florida. He also has dabbled in single-family investment and has a little bit of landlording experience. Very excited to have Broc. Broc, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, man. Glad to be here.
Awesome. If you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about yourself. We'll get to know you stuff.
So I originally from Southern California, and then went to school in the Northeast. Kind of lived just about everywhere now, being active duty Navy, so I'm not really from anywhere. We came to Jacksonville and kind of fell in love with it here. Love the neighborhood, love the weather, and so we decided to get settled here. And when I left active duty, my wife and I were kind of looking for what was next. Being a dentist, I knew I was going to go into practice, but we were kind of looking for something else to do as well. And we had a really, we're very passionate about craft beer and wanted to kind of just help Jacksonville grow its craft beer scene. So when I separated from the Navy, or I went reserves, we decided to kind of get the brewery up and running. So
that's awesome. For those that don't know, Jacksonville has a huge active Navy and retired Navy population. I believe it's the #1 retirement city for Navy. I could be wrong about that.
A lot of people come here to retire, and a lot of people choose to do their last tour of duty here so they can retire here. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's a very Navy-friendly or military-friendly town, and it's a good place to be.
Yeah. And for a coastal Florida town, it's still fairly affordable. I might have to kind of air quote the affordable. It's becoming less affordable like most of Florida. But when you have the type of population growth we're having, it's hard to stay. It's really affordable. Yeah. But yeah, we got the coast, the river, Mayport. You can live a lot of different lifestyles here, and Jacksonville doesn't feel like the rest of Florida. It almost feels like South Georgia.
I agree. Yeah, to me, it's got more of a southern city feel. You're going to get kind of that more Savannah, Charleston type feel than you will Miami, Tampa. Mm-hmm. But we still have a beautiful beach, so you still get that atmosphere. But it's a little bit more of a kind of a beach bum kind of town, as opposed to being nightclubs and that kind of thing.
I remember people used to joke when I was doing commercial real estate appraisal. Maybe now it's probably been over 10 years ago, but they'd say, if you want to know what Jacksonville is going to become, just look at Tampa 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. So the joke was we're just 10 years lagging Tampa. Yeah. I think as time moves on, that's not quite so true, but you've seen a lot of big projects. Things are changing here quickly. But jumping back into your background a little bit, in the Navy, so would you go straight undergrad to Navy? Were you like in an OCS program, or how did that look?
Yeah, so when I went to undergrad, at Villanova University, and it has a massive ROTC program. It's actually the largest pipeline for naval officers besides the Naval Academy. But I was not part of ROTC or anything when I was at Nova. I took a few years off, was working in the pharmaceutical industry for a few years, and then I decided to go to dental school. And when I went to dental school, it was, got the first bill in the mail, and Tufts was almost $90,000 a year education, and we didn't have a way to pay for it. So I went the Navy route, did a scholarship program through them. So the way it works is, every year that they pay for school, you owe them 1 year in service. So from my perspective, it's probably the best single financial decision I've made in my entire life, because I was able to pay back all of my student loans for 4 years of service. So it worked out great.
Tufts is the dental program?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so, because I don't know, I'm not military, but if you came out of undergrad, I didn't know that. So you came out, you were doing pharmaceutical, and you decided you want to be a dentist, and you're like, this is a horrible burden. How am I going to get through this financially? I kind of should have thought about that for law school, but I was probably too old and decrepit to join the military when I went to law school. But so will they pay for any amount of education? Like, are they going to say, because that's expensive education, law was expensive, so, but they clearly paid dollar for dollar what you needed?
They do, yeah. So as far as the school you go to, it doesn't really matter. The scholarship is for, year for year. Doesn't matter what institution you go to. So, choosing to go to a private institution, there were probably a larger number of people using the scholarship at the school. Because, if I had gone to a state school, like let's say UCLA, being from California, I still had residency there. I would have been somewhere in the $13,000 a year, whereas from a financial decision, it may not have been the best option, because $13,000 in loans for a year of school isn't so bad. $90,000 is way too much, right? So that's why I kind of decided to do that. So there's a lot of people who do, and for me, it was a great experience. One, I was in the Navy, I got to see the world. Yes, I had to do a deployment and was away from family and all that stuff for a little while, but I mean, I have some fond memories, and it was a great experience. I think it only brought my wife and I closer together. So there's a lot that I learned in the Navy that has allowed me to kind of be successful after the Navy. Mm-hmm. So to me, I more than just getting the financial return, leadership skills, how to run a business, how to manage people, all of those things you learn when you're active duty, and they're great life lessons.
So in your role in the Navy, were you like in a leadership or managerial role?
So my first year, no, I was basically learning how to wear the uniform and salute people, so it's a kind of a learning experience. But when I went out to San Diego and I was on my ship, when I got there pretty quickly, it's a small ship, not a huge ship company, about 400 people in total. You get there, and I was the 4th ranking officer on the ship. So you go from bottom of the barrel to top pretty quick, and you have to learn really fast how to kind of be a good leader. Luckily, I was surrounded by very good leaders, and so you learn from them. I had some great XOs and COs while I was in the Navy, and then, after I was on the ship for about a couple months, I became the medical officer. So I was still the dental officer, but I became the department head for medical. And when we deployed, we take on about 1,000 Marines in total on the ship. So we go from a small ship to a pretty large operation pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. And so kind of managing a medical department of 30 people or so was, a huge learning experience for me. But I mean, there's not many other places where you can learn that kind of stuff, like on the job training, and having a good support system behind you to kind of learn how to do that style stuff. So
I feel like when I meet guys like yourself, with the military background, and I have a couple professional friends that are retired military or I don't think they're activists like you, or reservists. Yeah, I don't have my verbiage right, but something about working with multi-million-dollar machinery, high consequence, lots of structure. I feel like you guys, I'm kind of overgeneralizing, but you guys come out of the military, it's like the rest of the world probably seems almost like easy and simple.
Sure.
Or really lax.
Sure. Yeah, it is definitely, there's a lot of structure, and for reason, right? Good reason. It's a $1.4 billion ship with, untold number of dollars in training and the personnel aboard and the equipment and everything else that goes with it. So it's a big, asset, right? Taxpayer dollars. And so you have to kind of have a structure with it. But it's great because, coming into the brewery world, we're talking obviously not $1 billion in investment as far as equipment goes. But, the equipment we use is expensive. Mm-hmm. It's mechanically inclined. You have to kind of be able to think on your feet, but also have a structure. So going from military to brewery life is an easy transition because it's about building a standard protocol for what you're doing. And I learned how to do that in the Navy, and it kind of translated very well to the brewery.
And if you already said it, forgive me, but you do your service and then your education? Was that the order?
No. So I did education, and then after I graduated, it was boom in the Navy.
Gotcha. That's kind of what I was gleaning because you said you were being the medical officer. I was like, well, you must have had some previous. So you got your education paid for, then it's off to the Navy.
Yep.
And so because I was about to ask what your technical role was in the Navy, but it sounds like other than the very beginning uniform pressing, it was medical.
Yep.
Oriented.
So yeah, for sure. I mean, a dental officer, when you go into an active role, like so if you're with an EMF or the Marine Corps, or you're going into a ship setting, you're the dentist. Obviously, you're going to see patients and make sure people get their exams and their cleanings and fillings and crowns and all the other stuff they need to have done. And you're going to get them ready to go on a deployment. But you're your secondary job is to train. In large settings, we are the mass casualty officer. So I had to go to San Antonio and do quite extensive training, 6 weeks, 3 different times. And it was learning how to handle a triage situation, which is, again, not in our purview in civilian life, but in military life, it's kind of what our role is. The reason they make the dentist the casualty officer is because we don't have as much medical training, so we tend not to get kind of horse blinders about a particular patient. We're kind of making a more over-branched assessment of the situation, saying, these people we need to get, expedited and get care, and these people are going to be fine for the next couple hours, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a totally different mindset when you get into those kinds of settings, but I mean, that's what we train for. That's the whole point of the military. So, and as the Navy, our job is to, not only be in the Navy, but we're also there to support the Marine Corps. And those are guys that are doing the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
So we got to be ready for them.
That's really interesting. So I guess I never gathered that, you got this extra medical training, the triage stuff. So, I mean, you're probably the only dentist in Jacksonville that, can handle triage work.
You'd be surprised. There's quite a few retired, again,
the Navy
military. Yeah, there's
yeah.
a lot of retired Navy dentists that are in the area.
Yeah.
So it's a good community.
So if somebody, climbs up one of your brew tanks and takes a swan dive,
I'm ready.
You're ready.
I'm ready.
You're ready for anything.
I'm ready.
I like it.
Yeah.
I think that's a good segue. So you come out of, you got, obviously undergrad, then you do your education, you do your service. You come out, I'm assuming, probably around 30?
Yeah, so I separated from the Navy when I was 32 years old. Yep,
32, okay.
Yep.
So let's pick up there with your story. And I know that the Fishweir Brewery effort is a critical part of your identity and what we want to talk about. So where were you at 32 and what was the next step?
Yeah, so when Stacy and I moved here, it's actually when we met in Charleston, our very first date was at a brewery. And basically our entire relationship was kind of bouncing around the country, going to breweries, doing things. And so when we were in San Diego, when we left San Diego to come here, San Diego County had 260 plus breweries in San Diego County. So it's a lot, right? It's a lot. Of course, more people there, right?
Yeah,
Bigger.
that is a lot.
It's a lot of breweries, right? Per capita, it was significantly more than here. So when we got here in 2016, there were 10 breweries that were kind of active in the microbrew scene, kind of craft beer. And so we got the Ale Trail book, and we did all the breweries in a weekend, right? So between Saturday and Sunday, we hit them all. And so we kind of looked at each other and said, we can do something about this, right? So over time, we kind of thought about it and tossed the idea around. And then eventually one day I just said, it's time to do it. Let's do it. And Stacy was kind of blowing me off like, you'll never be able to put it together kind of thing. And then we worked really hard together on it. And it's a project that, it's a lot of work to start a business from nothing. You know that. Yeah. And you start from zero. It's a lot of work. And it's also trying to convince other people that you know what you're doing and that you're ready to do it. And so it was time for us to kind of do it, and we put a lot of time and effort into getting everything off the ground. And then, I think the biggest thing for us was originally how are we going to raise the capital, right? So we had some of our own, but obviously we needed to kind of finance the business somehow. Mm-hmm. We didn't really know how we were going to structure that and how we want to do it. We knew we needed to get some investors. And to be honest, I think Stacy probably didn't think we'd ever get them. But the one thing I've learned, I think, with this business and with our other business ventures that we've done, is money is never the problem. You can always find the money if you have a good idea and you have a goal and you're driven to do something. Money is never what's going to stop you. Okay, it's always out there because there's people who have it that want to be doing something with it, and you just got to show them. So it's about kind of, obviously networking and knowing who you're working with. But I think the bigger part is that you can always.
I waved the white notebook on that one, or the yellow, because that was a golden nugget. So
yeah, okay.
That's for the producer to know. We got to pull that one down. That was great.
Yeah.
And I totally, and I'm not trying to cut you off, I would jump right back into that capital raising side because I totally agree. But I feel like it's like going through the looking glass. Until you've raised capital or private money, it does seem like insurmountable or like you can't do it.
Yep.
Like who's going to do it for me or my effort or my team? And just a quick anecdote because it's so fresh. What's today? We're recording this on a Wednesday. This most recent Monday, 48 hours ago, I closed on a quadruplex just a couple blocks off the ocean down in Atlantic Beach.
Yeah, I saw pictures of it the other day. You posted, yeah.
We're going to take a 4-unit office and by we, it's really me, and converted it into 4 short-term rentals, like Airbnbs.
Yep.
The zoning allows it, and the rest of that area, you can only do 90-day rentals. So I really like the deal. However, on the lending side, they were all getting stumped that it's 4 offices, and I'm going to short-term rental. I gave them the zoning code. They're like, okay, we can make it happen. Then last second, they're like, no, we can't do this loan. And instead of abandoning the deal, I started to smile and dial and call some of my other investor friends and say, do you have any just private high net worth individuals that might do a bridge loan for me so I can just buy this thing I'm going to refi off within a year?
Makes sense.
And I don't know the individual that did it. I mean, I met him and we talked on the phone, but I haven't met him face to face. On one phone call, and I kid you not, it was I think 6 minutes and 30 seconds on my iPhone. And in one email afterwards, he agreed to fund the entire acquisition. And he said, when do you need the money? I said I need it in 5 days. And he went with it, and he's good. And so now I own that building. But to your point, I don't think a few years ago, even though I've been doing real estate a while, I don't until you have the experience of trying to like pitch your
100%.
idea, and you need to say it with enough conviction. You don't want to fool anybody, but if you're like pulling on someone's shirt sleeves, like, oh, please, sir, can I have your money? But like when you have a real business plan and a track record, I think to your point, people will lend you money. But jumping right back into you there.
Yeah, so for sure. I mean, the first time you do it, and for us it was scary, terrifying, all that stuff. We probably oversold ourselves because we just really wanted to kind of get the money together. And but for sure, I think once you've done it once, the second and third, that's why people who've started one business usually don't stop with one, right? They're at 2 and 3 and 4 because once you've done it once, the steps kind of they're all the same. They're just for a different goal. So getting the money together becomes less of a hurdle, a mountain to climb, because once you've done it once, it's possible. So you just go and do it again.
Yeah.
And so that was probably the thing we learned the quickest was that the money's there. It's out there. You just got to talk about it. You got to tell people about it. That's all.
You don't have to obviously name your angels, but
Sure.
Roughly how many people did you have? Just so people know, like, okay, I had to raise this money. Is it 20 strangers? Is it a couple of friends and family? Just to give a little bit of texture.
Yeah. So our goal was to basically kind of quote unquote sell 30 or use 30% of the business as kind of a fundraising tool. So we took 30% of the business and shopped it around, and we ended up getting a total of 4 investors to start. We ended up picking up a 5th along the way. And so we ended up having a group of about 5 people. We have one larger investor and then a few other small kind of in that kind of $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 range. So it worked out great. For us, I think it's been nice to kind of have our angels kind of spread out and not have one person from our perspective, because the group of people who are invested aren't necessarily super involved in the day-to-day operation stuff. That most of the stuff that we're doing day to day, we're doing together, Stacy and I. And I say that now is over the last 3 years, a lot of that day to day operation stuff has shifted away from me into Stacy. Stacy is our GM now. She runs the show top to bottom. She runs the taproom like a Swiss watch. She's the one who's working with the brewing team and making the schedule and all that stuff. I've migrated more towards running the business itself, and then doing the outside sales. So that's kind of what I've kind of morphed into. And that's the other part about owning a business, right, is you kind of have to be prepared to do everything, When we got the brewery going, we had some plumbing issues, and who was the plumber? It was me. Going in there and snaking the sewer system isn't glorious, but it's what had to be done, and that's the kind of stuff that happens, right? You got to be prepared to be that jack of all trades and to do the things that you can't really pay someone to do, right. So, or you don't want to anyway.
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of what it comes to.
So just to put a pin on the capital raising side, you brought on the investors, 30% was up for grabs. You bring them on, small handful of people, grew to 5. And then I assume the balance maybe was like SBA or local bank.
So what we ended up doing was we ended up kind of tapping into probably some non-traditional loaning. So we went to some family members and were able to do some kind of refi home style stuff where we're taking money out of houses. So we were able to do that, and then for the equipment itself, the hard assets, we worked with a bank that does brewery specific equipment. So we finance the equipment in the business.
Do those, because you have those companies with the big equipment, do they have financing mechanisms like you can finance them from the vendors? Or?
Some do.
Okay.
The one that we went with did not at the time have their own financing, side of the business. So we went to a different bank. But essentially, this bank exists specifically just to loan, money to breweries that are startups. So we were able to finance all the equipment, and then so the build out was really the only capital we needed to raise, which is kind of what was probably about 50-50 from initial investment from our angels, and then what we were able to kind of personally take ourselves. So
moving into what I call like the physical plant, the asset sticks and bricks side. Let's talk about how and where you decided to put your brewery and what you had to do.
Yeah, so for us, I think one of the things that we loved about San Diego was that a lot of the breweries are built kind of right in the middle of a neighborhood, right? And they become like the meeting point, community focus, right? And to us, the successful breweries, not necessarily the ones that everybody's heard about, but the ones that have a longer term success are the ones that kind of entrench themselves in a neighborhood. So for us, it was about finding that neighborhood spot, about really kind of nailing that down. And when we first started looking, Murray Hill was an area to us that reminded us a lot of North Park in San Diego, which is a kind of a cool part of town. Older post-war homes, a lot of starter homes as, single family, 2 adults, 1 kid, kind of just getting going, right? And that was kind of bread and butter for a lot of those breweries, and we wanted to kind of be in that territory, in that same setting. So, we weren't reinventing the wheel. We're just taking what other people have been successful with and trying to apply it here. And so we chose Murray Hill, and we had some struggles getting the building, getting the spot, finding a good place. Commercial real estate in this town can be tough. In any town can be tough. And so we were trying to figure out a way to make it work. So then we migrated away from Murray Hill for a little while. We looked at some other places, Riverside, Avondale. We looked for some other buildings, but it was really, that was the spot that was for us, and we needed to kind of go back to it. So we ended up making it work with the landlord. We don't own the building, we lease it. And we ended up kind of coming to terms with him, and we have, I think, a pretty favorable situation. It's beneficial for him, too. The building was vacant for 7 years.
Wow.
He wasn't going to get anybody in there who wasn't going to put significant amount of money into the infrastructure of the building, which we had to do anyway as a brewery. When we go in, it's not regular just white box it and put desks and chairs. We're talking about we needed a 3-inch water line. That's a $40,000 investment. That's not cheap. It's not quick either. It takes time. We needed to bring natural gas into the building, which no one else on the block had. So that how do we overcome that? So the infrastructure in the building was significant, and he knows that, the owner of the building. So it was kind of those things where we were able to come to terms and say, we're going to put the investment into the building, but on the other side, you need to come to favorable terms with us so that it's beneficial for everybody.
You mentioned on the real estate side, commercial real estate can be challenging, and I do agree. The leasing is a whole different animal than just the purchase and sale. I think you had to do a rezoning, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so we did a PUD,
okay.
Which is, so in Jacksonville, there is no zoning for a brewery. The zoning code, the way it's written here, doesn't exist. There is nothing for a catch-all where you can both manufacture alcohol and sell it in the same place. Okay, there are uses by exception, like if you're agricultural or if you're light industrial, you can use it by use by exception. But if you're CCG, if you're any of the commercial ratings, or you're residential in any way, you cannot do both. You can sell or you can manufacture, but you can't do them both in the same building. So a lot of the breweries here in town do a planned unit development. Jack's Beach has since changed that zoning. So over there they have a zoning code specifically for breweries now because they have so many of them. But the city of Jacksonville hasn't changed that yet. So we did a PUD, which again takes time, right? Public hearing after posted notice and all this other stuff. You have to provide the city a ton of information. But to be honest, I went down and talked to the council person for the district, and I started kind of building relationships with the city council and with the planning department. And we went to them with our vision, which was community-focused, neighborhood-driven, family-friendly, watering hole. That's what we wanted to build. Our brand was going to be hyper-local. And people really supported that, especially in the Murray Hill neighborhood, because they want that neighborhood to continue to grow. And it has grown since we've gone in.
And that was one question you kind of just answered. Did you have any opposition? Because obviously with the rezone, you notice within, I believe, a 300-yard radius, and not to mention with social media today, pretty much the whole world knows the minute there's a new project.
That's right.
Did you have any opposition? Because like you said, it was a 7-year vacant building, old building that needed a lot. I remember there was some vagrancy sometimes in front of it because it was a vacant storefront. Yeah. Here comes you and Fishweir and you and Stacy bringing this new concept. Anybody object to you guys, or did you have much objection?
We didn't have any objection. We had hesitancy, I would say. I think that originally City Council and our rep were looking at us as alcohol going into a situation where alcohol previously did not yield good results. So they were a little hesitant. But once we kind of explained to them that we're not a typical club, we're not a typical alcohol-based bar. We're craft. We're a $6 pint. We're not a $2 PBR, right? So it brings a different kind of a different type of person, and it brings more of the family-oriented thing, which is what Murray Hill's becoming. Mm-hmm. As soon as that was laid and made clear to everybody, there was no resistance. So we had support from everybody. I mean, at the time, Ben Davis from Intuition was sitting on the Land Use and Zoning Committee. We went to Land Use and Zoning, and he was the first person to stand up and say, 100% they need to go there. So the other breweries in town were very supportive. The businesses were very supportive. The neighborhood was very supportive. So it's a good thing. I think it also would have been difficult just from the mission statement we had kind of founded the brewery on to go into an area where we would have had to fight to get in there. You know what I mean? If we would have sensed resistance or had resistance, we probably would have looked for a different location. Because we certainly want to be somewhere where we're wanted, and we want to also be there to serve the community. Mm-hmm. So if our way of serving the community is not being in that location, then that's kind of what we got to be. Yeah.
A couple little thoughts on that run there. So just by happenstance, I don't know Ben Davis, who was obviously in support of your project, but I ended up taking his seat on Planning Commission.
Okay.
So when he vacated, 2.5-3 years ago. And the other thing is, yes, I remember, just one point of clarity for the audience, the previous occupant, wasn't it Fat Cats? Am I wrong on that?
That's correct.
And because you mentioned the alcohol coming after alcohol and the last alcohol user not being welcomed, or certainly a happy exit for them from the community standpoint. I don't know much about it, but what wasn't it like, a full liquor nightclub, kind of rowdy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was I call it a hybrid nightclub because it wasn't just like a club. It also had like a VIP section that was a little on the seedy side, and it just didn't draw. It's not the kind of thing you would want in your neighborhood by any means. Okay,
so just point of clarity, Broc brings Fishweir into a location that used to have a rowdy club, but obviously you could distinguish with the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Here's what we are, a community watering hole. And I do think that the world is getting, I'll speak for Northeast Florida where we are. They're getting a little more accustomed to like what the environment of a brewery is. I
100%.
feel like selling the concept of like this is not a traditional bar is getting to be an easier pitch.
It is now. Yeah, I agree.
Maybe not when you were first coming.
When we first started the rezoning process, it was early spring of 2018. And at the time there had been a few more openings of breweries, so we were in that kind of 11, 12 range. But we're not where we are now, 20 plus. I was
going to ask you, so it's over 20 now?
So it's grown, and because that's happened, people are starting to understand a little bit more what it is. Again, if you go to a more, what I call, mature beer scene, like in San Diego or in Charleston or Asheville, and you go there, a brewery isn't a place where there's 5 regulars at the bar taking shots. It's a totally different thing. Yeah. It's strollers and games and darts and the game is on and there's lots of stuff going on, and it's not just one thing. It's the Rotary clubs in the back, and there's a baptism party going on over on the side, and there's that's what breweries have become.
Yeah.
And that's what we wanted to be, and I think it's important. I think before Prohibition, that's what breweries used to be too. It was the local spot. Everybody had beer from their town that was, their brand, their style, and they went there to be part of the public house, and that's really where that comes from. So, I think that what we're seeing is a return to that, because there is something nice about after work getting together with not just a few friends, but maybe with families and having a pint.
I think I'm glad you said that because not that I have any real acumen, but I did a little bit of home brewing like 5 years ago, and maybe did, let's call it, a half dozen batches.
Sure.
Maybe 2 or 3 of them drinkable. And I was reading my little book that came with the homebrew kit, and it was talking about, to your point, before Prohibition, every neighborhood had local watering holes, and there was no like InBev, not the big Coors and Anheuser guys, are not to the degree they are now. So the resurgence that we're seeing, I think like today's population might say, wow, there's a lot of breweries. What's going? Well, it is going back to like the days of old. And what I like is if you travel, about a year ago, my wife and I took the kids, we did a month-long RV trip in the month of March. So almost exactly a year ago. Every little town, I mean, you can just brewery tour essentially, and you can get the culture and the feel and of course the flavors, and a lot of times there might be live music or a food truck or whatever it is. It's a cool way to experience a city.
100%.
Yeah.
And I think, Jacksonville has embraced that a lot with the ale trail. It's a huge part of it. But when you go to any other city that has a large brewing scene, the tourism board gets lockstep behind them because it's an important part of tourism nowadays. When you go and you travel to a city, you don't just go because you're going to the aquarium or the museum or going to a football game or whatever. You go to experience the flavor, right? You want to try the food, you want to try the drinks, you want to try the cool happening places, you want to go do those things. And a lot of times a great place to start is the brewery, or one of the breweries. You go there, you kind of get a sense for what the community's like, what the food's like, what the beer's like, and from there you can kind of branch off and learn more about the neighborhood. And for sure that's the way it is here too.
Bringing it kind of Fishweir centric to your project, you signed a lease, the rezoning's done, the building, like we said, had been vacant for over 7 years, had some failed systems, you're breaking concrete, you're running new lines, you're upgrading. How long was your build-out process?
Longer than I wanted it to be. No, the build-out process was just short of 6 months. We wanted to kind of be in that 4-month range, but in reality with, of course, getting the new water line, we had issues with sewer, we had issues with natural gas, we had issues with basically everything along the way. It took some time. Plus, the building is old. It's 1951, and it was vacant for such a long time. There were some spots in the building that were a little unforeseen, things that we kind of dug up and had to deal with. So, it got tight at the end, and the timeline was definitely pushed. But it is what it is. That's what happens. I mean, these older buildings, they give you a headache when you first get going, and they definitely have their quirks when you're open. But they give you something that you don't get from something else, something that's brand new.
Mm-hmm.
So for sure, it's a benefit to have the older building and to have the space we do. But it was troubling. It was hard at times. So we did some pretty significant structural work to the building too, because we wanted to really kind of change the feel and flow of the building. And so we had to. I mean, we put in some steel to support the existing structure. So that's anytime you're physically changing an old brick building like that, it's not an easy job. It also makes contractors sweat a little bit because there's a lot of risk. So that was an adventure. But I mean, I think all in all, it was totally worth it, and the project was something that I thought was successful.
So your 6-month build out. Can you talk a little bit about how the ramping up period? Because obviously this is your first baby here, bringing this brewery to fruition. I have a couple other questions, but kind of like, what looking backwards, just kind of the story of that ramp up, maybe that first year, kind of what was working, what wasn't working.
Yeah, I think probably the part, and I think if you ask Stacy this too, if we could go back and do the project all over again, we would change our floor plan entirely, okay? I think one of the hardest things as a builder of restaurants, bars, breweries, anything that is service related, I think that anytime you're looking at a piece of paper, 2D drawing of what you're going to be doing, having the skill to be able to visualize that in 3 dimensions and understand how people are going to interact with the space is probably the most difficult part, right? For sure, I wish we would have pegged and worked with more professionals who had done this before to kind of gain information from them. And I think now Stacy and I we know what works and what doesn't, right? So for sure, I think we would have changed the floor plan pretty significantly to just increase use of space and kind of understand kind of how people, now that we know how people interact with the space, we would change some things. So that's probably a big part of the project too. The successes and the failures that we kind of had along the way, I think, are what everybody experiences when you build something out. This process of building, taking four walls and turning it into a vision, whatever it may be, it doesn't matter if it's a law office or a restaurant. The process is you got to be willing to get in there and get your hands dirty, okay? Especially if it's your first one, like it was for us. We did all the demo ourselves. My dad and I went in there and spent hours on hours on hours with a generator and some spotlights and a dust mask and some sledgehammers, and we ripped everything out of that building we could so that we didn't have to spend that money. We had our time. So while we were waiting for the city to do our PUD and all that stuff, we were in there cleaning that gut in that building, getting it ready. And it took a long time, and it was a dirty, dirty job. But I mean, those are the kinds of things you got to do when you're kind of getting off the ground.
Yeah, some people think of this like in a religious context, but the words still apply to non-religious. But time, talent, and treasure, and that's kind of what we all have. And if you look at it, if you have the time, there's your bandwidth. Throw it on in there. You're trying to stay lean,
100%.
Get it done. And a corollary to that, not everyone in this audience, or actually almost nobody in this audience, is going to open a brewery. Maybe a diamond in the rough listening right now, but it's still very interesting. What I advise people, let's say you're not going to do a brewery, but you want to grow a rental portfolio, whatever it's going to be, strip centers, apartments, industrial buildings, single family homes, whatever. I still advise people to go ahead and self-manage, kind of owner-landlord, at least their first couple deals, even if you hate it. And you might not even be good at it. The next person you hire to do it, at least you can spot check them. You have some context for what they're 100%. Doing. If you're just like, here's my property, here's the tenant contact, here's the leases, here's the keys, I've never managed, give me my checks at the end of the month. Good luck.
Yeah. No, I agree with that too. For me, the other part of that too is that when you're hands-on involved in the project, I was on site every day. Yes, our construction team was quote unquote managing the project, but I had my nose in everybody's business and what they were doing. My electricians, my plumbers, my mechanical guys, AC, everybody else. And from that build out, I have built relationships that have helped me and helped us with, we don't have our rental property in Charleston anymore, but when we had that property and we needed work, we had my air conditioning guy that built the brewery is still the guy I use for everything now today because he's, in my opinion, the best. He's the cheapest. He's a friend of ours now. And now I have him as my contact. When I call him, he answers the phone, and he'll be there in 5 minutes if I need him to be. When we had an issue with our rental unit, he left here in Jacksonville, drove up there, swapped out the unit, came back same day. Those are the kinds of relationships that you build if you're involved in the project deeply, because then you make those contacts, and then he'll know somebody who's going to be, your drywall guy or your plumber or whatever else. So that when you have that's for us, I think one of the things that we sold that rental property there, and that was, again, my wife's investment. It was before I knew her, but it was a great investment she made, great decision she made. And now that we've sold that house, we want to wait for the market to kind of cool off a little bit here. But when we get into the market here to do, residential stuff, that's 100%, having those connections, those people that will, hey, I've got a guy who does this and a guy who does this and a guy who does this. It's important to have those things. It doesn't matter if you're doing residential or commercial. You got to have people to do the job, right? And you have to have people you trust and will do it for a fair price. So that's half the battle. That's why I think being involved in the day-to-day stuff, it helps you with that.
I think, and going back to maybe 20 minutes ago or whatever it was, the conversation about how you see people, if they have one, a lot of times they might have 2, 3, 4, 5, 12, and whether it's businesses or properties, whatever. Because the point is, once you've trenched through that first one,
that's right.
It's like, why not? That was most of the brain damage.
That's right.
The fruit is almost in trying to do some scale.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, and to your point, you got to roll up and get in it.
That's right. And you'll be surprised how quickly you get good at painting, and you get good at doing finishing work and things like that, so that when you get to the end, you can get the property or the whatever, the build out to the finish. You know what I mean? And so that, for sure, once you've done it once, every other time after that, it's only going to get easier. So
here we are. You're a practicing dentist. You own a successful brewery with your wife, Stacy. You've been open how long? Remind me. Are we at full?
So we're at 3.5.
3.5.
Yeah.
Okay, 3.5 years in operation. What's happened in 3.5 years? So I frequent the brewery with my family. We love it. what are some things you've learned over the past? We talked about the very beginning ramp up, from the beginning, you might have changed the floor plan if you did a second one. But kind of what's working, what's not working now that you guys have survived COVID, thank God.
Yeah.
And, well, I know we're still in it, but at least we're recording this in Florida for everybody, so we've been wide open. If you're listening to this somewhere else, I can't speak for that. But Broc's operation, and I can let him speak to it, was shut down, and then they had to get food. I should probably pause and let you speak to it, but maybe you briefly speak kind of how you got through that COVID pinch.
Yeah, so 2020 is a year I just tried to pretend didn't exist from a business standpoint. I think a lot of business owners, it doesn't necessarily have to be brewery related or food and beverage. I think everybody it was a tough time, right? So we were closed. In 2020 there was a period where because of the regulations that were in place, we had been closed more days than we had been open, which is tough for a business. We've got a large overhead. It's a big building. Equipment loans didn't go away. Raw ingredients and salaries and all that other stuff didn't go away, and so it's a challenge. The overhead's not small, and so it was a tough period. There was definitely some conversations in our kitchen at home about, is this it? Are we not going to be able to make it through here? So, but I will say again, being community focused, entrenched in a neighborhood, as much as people weren't at work, they were still looking for something to do, and people with strollers and their dogs and everybody coming around 3:30 and buying a 4-pack and going to hang out in the park is what kept us open. It just basically kept us afloat for those couple months. So it was great. We got through the period. We had to add food to the operation for a small period of time because that was the regulation here in Florida. Because apparently, if you have food, you can't get COVID. So there's no problem there. But anyway, so once we got rolling again, 2020 was kind of a wash. It was we didn't make any ground. We didn't do anything. But as a whole, it affected everybody in different ways. Us being smaller, I think it had less of an effect than it did on some of the larger operations. And because of that, the market shifted, and we had kind of an opportunity to kind of springboard off of the down year into an upswing of 2021, right? As we all know, 2021 was a pretty good year for money in general. And so when that happens, more beers being bought and sold. So the market grew, and we were able to kind of grow into that market at the same time. While some other breweries in town were kind of pulling out of distribution, bars and restaurants around town, we were able to kind of fill their shoes and also grow natively. So from, I don't count 2020. So from 2019 to 2021, our production was almost 2x.
Nice.
So which is great, so it's good to see that kind of return. We finally got to a point where, I'm not sure everybody is this way, but in the brewing industry, you're lucky if you're profitable in 18 months is kind of what your goal is. Most people, it takes 3 years. For us, it was 2019, we were kind of probably shooting for that 18 to 20 month period. And then 2020 happened, and it was like, not going to happen. Mm-hmm. So 2021 was finally that year where we were able to kind of step out of kind of the trenches and get into a profitable standpoint. I think one of the big things that's changed for us from when we first started was, I think when we first got going, it was, let's get the beer out there, let's make this beer, let's market the beer, beer. Okay, and that's great, and we love our product, we stand by it, I think we make really good beer. But there's a bigger aspect that I think we lost touch with in the beginning of our business, and that was our original core statement, mission statement, which was community focused and community driven. And we kind of got away from that a little bit, and we've now, Stacy has brought us all the way screeching back to it, which is we are the place where we want you to come and have your birthday party and your baptism, your first Holy Communion, maybe a wake for somebody. All of the things where you're getting people in the community together, we want people to think of Fishweir first because we want you to feel at home. And we have done a lot to make that the case. Stacy has really driven the event side of the business. Private events, that kind of thing, has just been massive for us. It's been a huge portion of our business, and the growth there has been really nice. So it's helped us kind of allow us to build the new outdoor beer garden space we have, which again only creates more room for events and spaces like that. So that's kind of where we've gone over the last, in 2021 was kind of refocusing on our core mission statement, kind of really honing in on what it is to be a community-focused brewery. And to be honest, that's my wife. Stacy, she has the pulse of the community, and she's really good at making sure that we're staying at kind of like that benchmark as part of the community. So she's really good at that stuff.
I concur. I see all the events you guys are doing, the Sunday yoga, all kinds of cool stuff in that new backyard. We're out there all the time with my family. I was curious, with some breweries, I see them, they're on the taps, they're in the coolers, meaning outside, so I'll call it distribution is probably the right word. What are some of the pros and cons, or could you speak to why, and I think this is national, you see some breweries that you just need to go to their tap room to drink it, and you see others where their goal seems to be to get in every cooler. Yeah. Can you speak to any of that?
Yeah, so a lot of that has to do with scale and then profitability. Okay, so just to kind of give everybody a reference, when we sell beer in the tap room, this is not just us, any brewery. So when you get beer poured out of a tap into a glass, 16 ounces put on the bar, and you're paying $6.50, maybe $7, $8 in different markets. When you're paying for that, you're seeing about an 8x return. Okay, that's kind of what the margin is on that beer. When we sell beer out the door to a distributor, we're selling it usually at about 2x. So it's significantly less as a margin. But if you can sell more of it, you can make up the difference in capital, right? So breweries that are doing large-scale distribution, okay, the Sierra Nevadas of the world, or even here in Jacksonville, the Intuitions, okay? Those kinds of places are making beer on a different scale. And the scale allows them to be okay with 2x and still have profitability, because instead of doing, like for us, we're going to do about maybe 900 U.S. barrels this calendar year. A U.S. barrel is 31 gallons, just for reference. So we're going to do about 900 U.S. barrels this year. Intuition does about 1,000 barrels a month. Okay, so it's a different scale, right? And to put that in perspective, Sierra Nevada does about 900 barrels an hour. Okay, so it's just a totally different scale of operation. So, and that's also why when you go to buy a 6-pack of a craft brewery that may be small like us, it's a $15, $16 4-pack, because the margin still has to be there, and the cost of ingredients is higher for us because we're buying on less scale. Whereas if you go to a Sierra Nevada, you can get a 6-pack, same volume as a 4-pack of 16 ounce. You get a 6-pack for, $10.99, $9.99. So it's just a margin thing. It's a margin game. And so when the breweries decide to kind of go over that hump of let's get into production and getting more beer out the door, it's just a profitability on scale is really what they're looking to achieve. Our goal long term is not to have that. We definitely want to grow, and we want to get into a bigger system and have the ability to do distribution. But our goal isn't to have Lazy River cans in every grocery store in the state of Florida. That's just not what we want. In my opinion, now that where we are in the craft beer market is those mid-sized breweries that exist that don't get gobbled up by somebody else are the ones who are going to suffer long term, because as more and more breweries pop up, people are becoming much more hyper-local with their choice. And they would much rather prefer go to the brewery, buy the beer, whatever, and then if they see it out in town, oh, great, I'll have a beer because I've been there and I like these people. But it's much less of the kind of route that a traditional Sierra Nevada would have grown out of 25 years ago. Mm-hmm. So I think the market has changed significantly, and I don't think that the future is going to be breweries like us growing to be a regional powerhouse. I just don't think that's what's possible.
So, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, it's more like competing in, like you said earlier, hyper-local, the event space, community focus, and like you said, the Ale Trail, which is a book we have here in Northeast Florida, and I think a lot of markets have it, where you get your stamps as you go through and see everything. Well, you want to be a stamp that people remember. They came to Fishweir, and again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems like where you're battling and duking it out is really on that hyper-local
100%.
Ale Trail type level.
That's right.
Instead of trying to be the Sierra Nevada putting
That's
out,
right.
I think, 900 an hour, was that right?
Yeah,
okay,
yeah. We definitely don't have any goals of being that size. For us, I think as far as growth goes, our next step might be a second location, where we were to open somewhere else within the North Florida market, where people still recognize the brand and we can still be local to Jacksonville and we can maybe offer a different setting where we have more of a brew pub based type thing. So there's food involved and that kind of situation. So for sure, for us, that would be probably the next step. But we're not in a hurry to make it. We're trying to maximize the kind of experience in our tap room, not just from a business perspective and profitability, but also customer end experience. We want people to come and remember our staff and remember the atmosphere and remember the neighborhood feel and context. I mean, when we built the brewery, we built the front of the building to look like a southern porch at home, right? We call our front patio area the front porch. We called the backyard because we want you to think that when you're in the brewery, you're in your own home. We want that to be the feel. And so we want it to be that kind of feel. And the more we can cultivate that experience, to us, the more memorable the experience for people coming from either out of town or from elsewhere in the city. They'll come and say, wow, that was a fun place to be, and I had a good time, And
I think you guys are killing it. Fast forward a little bit as you're a very ambitious guy, What are some of the goals? You said a second location, and that might just be the goal. But where do you want to take the operation? You just keep competing on the hyperlocal level, get a second location. Is there anything beyond that, or is that kind of where you see it?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think we would like to grow production scale wise. We'd like to get to the point where we can get beer out the door in a larger format to bars and restaurants and still be profitable with it. So for sure, that's a goal too. Probably, that might be a little further off than a second location. But, I think our goals for us are really kind of building a lasting brand. For me, it's not about get in, get out, right? For me, it's about long-term investment. This isn't a quick flip. I'm not looking to make a little bit of money on a decent investment. I'm looking to make a long-term, kind of thing so that Stacy and I have something we can look back and say, we built this. This is something that we did together. And then, as we get older, it's a way for us to kind of be a portion of our retirement package, and something that we have long term. So that's kind of our goal. I mean, this was never a project where we ever dreamed of getting rich quick or selling to Budweiser for $10 million or whatever it might be. That was never our goal. I mean, hey, if it happens and Budweiser offered me the money, I'd say, great, let's do it.
I was going to ask.
Yeah. We would do it in a heartbeat. But that's not our goal, right? So our goal is, to continue to be community-focused, to be neighborhood-driven, to be hyper-local. And we're going to continue to just feed on that because it's what we have found is a way for us to be, I think, successful, not 10 years from now, but 30 years from now.
I think that's very applicable. Like we said before, some of Broc's commentary is brewery centric, but it's very broadly applicable. Think about like your house flipper, which is like on the highest risk spectrum. Don't get me wrong. I have some friends that make a killing flipping houses, but it's also the highest risk versus somebody who's like portfolioing rentals, pulling out equity and refis, buying another property, the next year another property, and doing systematic, staged kind of mushroom style growth that can build really real wealth. And if one thing goes down or you have some vacancy, you have diversity in your portfolio, you're probably going to be fine. You're probably not going to lose anything.
Yeah, I agree.
Versus like just trying to get those big one-off deals in and out, grab the cash and go. Those are higher and speculative. One thing, I do have some audience questions, some questions that we got before the show. You have so much going on. You have an active. People need to hear this. You are a dentist and you practice. You have an active practice. What's a day in the life or a week in the life? I know your wife Stacy helps a lot on the organizational, operational side of the brewery, but how do you do it all? What's a day in the life like?
Well, the first thing I will say is, and I definitely talk you through a day, but for sure the most important part is having a good team, right? You have to have people you trust. We're very lucky in the people that we have. Obviously, my wife, I trust her wholeheartedly to do what she thinks is best. We definitely have our squabbles about what that is, but she's always doing what is best for the business. And we have a head brewer and a good brewing team who have been with us from the beginning, and they're fantastic and hardworking people. They care about the brand, they care about the company, and they're invested, and that's good. So having a good team is a big part of it. Okay. For me, it's a balance. I'm a Navy reservist. I'm an OIC of the medical battalion here in Jacksonville, And so I have a lot of work that I have to do with them too. So for me, it's about kind of finding the balance of, as a dentist, I work 4 days a week, but I'm not working crazy hours. I try to limit my time because I do want to still have time to spend time with my family. So I'm up early in the morning with the kids, so I get some time in the morning with them. Off to work. I'm usually done at my office around 5. Get home, and my phone goes on the counter and away, and I don't do any work when I get home until the kids go to bed. Right? Really important for me to kind of be really focused on them. And sometimes we break those rules, but we really try to focus on that. Do dinner, do the kids, go to bed. Once the kids go to bed, it's sometimes it's most nights it's sit down, get the laptop out. Sometimes it's doing accounting work, and sometimes it's emails and selling beer or working on equipment acquisitions or working with my other team. So I'm usually only at the brewery on Wednesdays is my full day. So I usually go in the morning, do some stuff with the head brewer and the brewing team, make sure they have all the ingredients and everything they need, raw materials, etc. And then I'm usually out the door to go do sales because that's kind of what my role has become. Get out in the market, talk to restaurant owners and beer buyers, and really try to position us at some of the other brands around the city that kind of mimic what we're trying to do so that we can have that good brand recognition in those places that are parallel to us. And then it's getting out and selling the beer. And then on the weekends, I usually try to keep Saturdays for the family or for Florida State games when it's football season.
Go Noles.
So that's important. And then on Sundays, Stacy goes and works, does a yoga thing, all that stuff, and then usually we swap. She comes home with the kids, and I'll go into the brewery and get inventory stuff done and all the other stuff needs taken care of. So, it's a lot. When I have drill weekends with the reserves, it's, I don't get a day off. I'm working kind of a solid 7-day week. But the way I look at it is I put the time and the energy in now. And if I do it well and I do it correctly and I do it with passion and integrity, then for sure I think, 10 years from now, I'll be in a position where, one, I'll have the ability to retire or to become semi-retired, or I can continue to work at this pace and build other things. And we'll just kind of have to wait and see, where I'm at when we get to that point. So
you jumped into the other question that I had from audience was, will you ever stable one horse? Which just obviously you're riding, I think three maybe 4, I don't know. You're riding many horses, but it sounds like that is for now all engines are forward, and maybe down the road you'll consider stabling a horse.
Yeah, for sure. I think the idea would be I want to get to a point where I have a day, maybe a week to play golf would be nice. So it'd be nice to be able to get out there and hit the golf ball a little bit. But yeah, for now the plan is just I'm gonna keep going, getting things what we need to do, and I'm still young. I've got the energy. I still have a drive to do it, and I like what I do. That's the other part too is for anybody who's doing this kind of work, it is kind of the all hours of the day type thing. It's the phone calls. It's when this person calls, I got to take it because this could be that person who's going to say, yeah, I'm gonna help you buy your fourplex, so like those conversations, they don't always happen from 9 to 5, and you have to be flexible and you have to be willing to get out there and do it on the weekends and do it on days when other people are doing fun stuff, right? Yeah. But at the same time, if you do it now and you put the work in, at the other end of it, you're gonna get something out of it. And if you like what you're doing, right, that's a big part. I get the benefit of, I go and I practice dentistry, and dentistry's great. I love being a dentist. I'm very passionate about it. I love my patients. I love my staff. It's been great, and I will do it probably for a very long time. But like any job, there's still frustrations, right? Something may not go right, or you have a patient who's a pain in your butt or whatever, and it's frustrating. Well, it's great because then I can turn and focus on the brewery, and if I get frustrated with something there, I can turn away from that and go back to practice. So there's good balance for me. It's not doing the same thing every single day. Yes, I'm doing the brewery every day, but it's intertwined with my practice or with the reserves or with other things. So the balance to me of having multiple focuses allows my brain at least to kind of be more calm.
Mm-hmm. I actually think we share that tendency. It's not. I tend to think it's not how the general population works, but I like having. I don't want to be a mosquito scattered on a bunch of things, and I'm not saying you are, but having a narrow focus on a few different passion projects does help my mind as well. And if you're right, if one thing is just stalling or sinking, but you know it will eventually rise up, you can kind of align your energies and kind of keep your psyche up. Yeah. Another thing you mentioned that I really like is some people only work on what's like the highest yield. And I know this platform is Yield Coach. Also bear in mind, Broc's talking about like a lifetime legacy, a lasting brand. You said some really insightful things. If you don't have passion for it, you're never going to get to that lasting moment. And so don't always chase what's necessarily the very highest yield that you can think of. Think of the highest yield that aligns with your passion. Well, that's my opinion. But you need to definitely overlay your passions with what's going to be high yield. Some people, they're probably not listening to this podcast, are only going to focus on passions. And God bless them. I have plenty of friends that are 100% passion focused. I think if you can find something that will give you maybe a legacy, help you build wealth and control and financial freedom, that is the platform, and overlay it with some passions, you'll have staying power. So when you have those rough days, you're like, well, you know what? I'm still committed to this. I still like this. It's in my bones. And you won't stray from the hard days.
Yeah, I agree. I also think it's a good point, too, is that I think for us in the beginning, we didn't take this approach of starting the brewery as a way for us to kind of return. It wasn't. We didn't think of it as an investment. My mind wasn't there yet. It took me time to get there. Now that I am where I am, and I'm starting to look at things as where is this going to take me? What is this going to give my family? What opportunities is it going to open up? You start to kind of be. I think differently about the way we invest and the way we do things. But that being said, like for sure, the brewery is always going to be that passion project. So that, like you said, even if there's a down year like COVID, you stick with it and you keep doing it because we love it. And hopefully the goal is eventually it becomes successful and does bring something to the family. And if it doesn't, there's no sweat off our back. We did the best we could, and we made friends along the way, and that's important.
Made friends, got to drink some good beer.
That's right.
Yeah, there are worse things in life.
That's right. That's right.
I think this last question, you've kind of already hit it. And when I say last question from this kind of audience little list I have, but I think there's a lot of people, honestly, sometimes myself included, but I'm not going to be doing this. You go to Fishweir, or I go to other breweries when I'm traveling, and I'm like, man, I want to do this too. But, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. I think the staying power and passion is so critical, but when you hear people, I'm sure people say this all the time to you, what's your advice to somebody who's like, by God, I love craft beer, I want to do this too? What would you say to them?
I think if you asked all of the brewery owners in Jacksonville, hey, I'm thinking about opening a brewery, what should I do? They'd all jokingly raise a glass to you and say, don't do it, right? And it would be a joke, like a chuckle, ha ha. But there's some truth to it, right? And I think you hit the nail on the head. If you're not passionate about this industry, don't go anywhere near it. And I think the same is true for, again, going back to like property investment. The house we had in Charleston was a disaster when our tenants moved out. We had to flip it. It was Stacy and I leaving every afternoon on Friday, driving up there, okay, so 3 hours, doing a whole bunch of work on the house, Friday night, Saturday, all day Sunday, drive back. We did that for 6 weekends in a row to get that house ready to sell. And so it's a lot of work. You have no free time. We also were taking the babies with us, so we're trying to corral them and do all, it's a challenge. You know that. And so if you're not passionate about what you're doing, it's probably not for you, I have no doubt that there's going to be a time, hopefully, in my investment lifestyle that I don't necessarily have to be as hands-on and involved, because I don't think I could do it when I'm 65. But, when you're young and you have the ability, you just get in there, and you have to be passionate about it. If you want to open a brewery and you are passionate about the project, do it for the passion. Don't do it for the investment. If your passion is first, the financial reward will come later. That's the type of business that a brewery is. It's not a quick flip, turnaround type thing. It's something you need to get in and be willing to put 10 years into to really see that financial return, if that's what your goal is.
Thank you. That was a tasty nugget right there. That was a good one. All right, just a little bit on the personal as we wrap it up. Hobbies and interests that I know you're a busy man, but let's say you get a free day, what are some hobbies?
Yeah, interests? So I grew up with my dad working on houses, doing handyman style things. I like to work with wood. I do a lot of woodworking at home. At least I try to when I have time. So I like doing that stuff a lot. It's also part of the reason that, we did the brewery. We built the bar. I built the bar. I built a lot of the stuff physically in that building, and that was fun for me to do because I like to do that kind of stuff. So that's good. I like to play golf when I have a chance, so I like to get out and do that. And but my kids are. I was never one of those people who was like, I really want kids. I really want kids. And now that I've got to, they're awesome. I love being around them. I love spending time with them, and I love watching them learn stuff, which is really cool. And I also love how kids tend to pick up the really annoying parts of your spouse, right? Because my kids have some annoying tendencies, and when my wife sees it, it just drives her nuts, and that's fun too. So I like that part. Yeah.
We're as we wrap it up, do you have any resources that you like? Any books you've read along the way, whether business or investment, that imparted something in your mind, or did you just figure it all out as you go?
There's a lot of trial by fire, okay, which may be not the best way to do it. I know when we were doing the brewery, there's a bunch of books out there, literally starting with, how to open a brewery, the how-to books, open a brewery for dummies, that kind of thing, just to kind of get some of the basic information and knowledge. That's good. Ask a lot of questions, talk to people. For me, I know that when I get into the financial investing portion of what I do, I have some friends who do a lot of it, and I just talk to them about it. I think a lot of people are nervous to talk about money, right? It's a kind of a personal thing. I don't know if it's because for some people it's what makes you successful versus not. And in my opinion, that's not what makes you successful, money. So I don't have a problem talking about what I have and what I don't have, and how I got what I have and how I lost what I don't have. I don't have a problem talking about it because to me, the more you talk about it with people, the more you'll learn, right? People who do commercial real estate like you do, I have no experience in that, right? I mean, besides being a tenant, I've never owned a commercial building. I don't know what those leases look like. I don't know how the thought process behind them. So if I had a building, I don't care what I paid for it. I'd go and be like, this is what I did. And you might look at me and say, that was way too much money, or you're an idiot for buying that. That's too late now. I own the thing, right? So how do I make it the most successful thing I can? So for me, it's just don't be afraid to talk to people about it. Of course, some people are going to be like, whoa, I don't want to talk about this, and it might be not comfortable. But there's most people who are doing what you're doing, and kind of where we are, Stacy and I, they just don't have that fear because it's we're all trying to learn as we do this.
I totally agree, and it's a quick way to kind of ferret out who is quote unquote in the game, because the ones that are learning quickly are asking the questions.
That's right.
Most of what I know, I either learned from mentors, maybe some other podcasts. A lot of it is working with others. So I've talked about it on other shows, but I call it a cheat code. I kind of stole that from Pocky Judson with Hood Estates, but a cheat code is a good partner, because, and it doesn't sound like you and I scored that early on. I had some good mentorship in the appraisal industry, but if you have somebody that'll really bring you under their wing, ideally compensate you, but that's not even the most important thing. The most important thing is, can you sit on their shoulder, be on every call? Nowadays, it's probably every Zoom, look at every agreement, understand the cash flows. It depends on the industry, but understand why you're doing what you're doing. That's invaluable.
100%.
The trial by fire, which you and I think have both done a lot of, you can get there if you have integrity and you're a bit, stubborn and headstrong, but there are faster ways there. And I think to Broc's point, don't be shy speaking about money and business, because those that are already in that world, they're going to be pretty open. I find it to be a pretty helpful community.
Yeah, just how many times have you sent a personal financial statement to somebody? It's like they know exactly what I have and don't have. Those people know everything about me, right? Yeah. So at that point, what does it matter? Yeah. Right. It's a good exercise because it helps you see kind of where you are, right? So for me, I don't hesitate with that stuff anymore. For sure, before we did the brewery, I did. I don't now, because there's no point, right? There's no point to be worried about it or frustrated about it. I guess it goes back to the original point I made, which is if you have the passion, the money's always going to be available. It doesn't matter how much you have now. It only matters what you can get with what your goal is. So, I just don't be shy about it. Go out and talk to people, because most people don't have a problem talking about it once you broach the subject.
And just for the audience that doesn't know, the personal financial statement, or the PFS, it's essentially a balance sheet analysis that at the very bottom, or depending on the format, the bottom of page 1, shows your net worth. And it's It's something that if you haven't done it, you're going to have to do it for a commercial loan. I highly recommend you do it if you're just interested in investing, because it's probably the first time you've actually distilled that number.
You see a number.
You see a number and you're like, wow, okay.
Yep.
And it will help you with your goals. And the other thing, to Broc's point, you get used to having to fire off or email that PFS to generally lenders. The first time I did it, it was a local bank, ViStar. I sent them my PFS for an apartment acquisition. I felt like somebody had, the minute I hit send, I felt like somebody had just pantsed me in the locker room, and I was just like, oh my God, does everybody feel this way? But over time, you gain comfort, and really that's what it's all about, is just getting better every day. I've really enjoyed this. All right, Broc, where can people find you?
So Fishweir is located in Murray Hill in Jacksonville, so come on by the tap room for sure. We've got 16 different taps rotating seasonally. So some really good stuff going on. And then we're in probably 60 restaurants and bars around town. You're going to find cans of Lazy River in Fresh Market, Trader Joe's, the smaller grocery stores, some of the package stores that specialize in craft beer. And like I said, you're going to find us in a good number of restaurants here and there.
And we'll put your contact information in the show notes, but I believe you guys are Instagram, Facebook.
Instagram, Facebook. Stacy runs all that stuff. And then we're fishweirbrewing.com.
Okay.
And nice new website. Stacy actually just designed herself, so it's good stuff.
I'm going to give it a check out.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been a pleasure. I hope everybody gleaned a lot from this particular episode. I really loved it. Please rate and subscribe if you're enjoying this. Kind of helps us grow. We may one day even secure a sponsor. Maybe Fishweir. I actually thought we might drink a beer during this episode.
Sure.
But we are filming this in the morning. You can find us this will be on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, but go ahead and jump on, rate, subscribe, smash those buttons, help us grow, and we'll keep you posted on upcoming events in the future. For now, this is the Yield Coach Show. I am your host, Ian Brown, telling you all to lace up and leave it on the field. We're out.